Good afternoon, everyone, to another She Reads podcast on this beautiful day of April the 22nd, 2023. Today, I have the esteemed author, Libby Edwards Warner. Libby was born and raised in San Francisco. At the age of 12, she decided to become a writer due to hardships in her home. This is where A Time to Forgive was born. Throughout her life, she attended college, worked as a customer service coordinator, and as a nurse/medical assistant. She's also a plus-size model through Barbizon. She has been married 20 years and has one adult daughter. They currently live in Central Valley, California. Libby says, "My life's purpose is being the best version of myself by helping others on the way." This is her book, A Time to Forgive. It has a phenomenal cover. I was really drawn in by the cover because it's just like, almost like you can see, where when I first looked at the cover, I thought maybe she was entering into some kind of new life, but she's actually looking, I think, back on what she had and, leaving after reading your book, leaving the life that she had. But it was a wonderful book, a beautiful cover again. And if anyone has a chance to buy it and read it, I really would highly recommend it. It is a wonderful book. The only thing I can say, about the book that I was kind of like, it's like when we get to the end, and you're talking about how she's getting on the train and it's bound for Penn Station, and her home becomes a distant memory, and all that she had now is taking away. I was kind of like, but wait, because I want to know what's going to happen to her. I don't want to be left kind of hanging, and I'm wondering, and I'm hoping there is going to be a sequel.
It is.
Good.
There's a sequel. A friend of mine, she encouraged me to do like series of it because I worked so hard on the book.
Yes.
And I said, girl, I'm getting so tired. She said, make a series of it. And I said, okay. She said, you can do that. She said, remember that the power is in your hands as a self-published author. She said, you can do whatever you want. And I said, okay, I'm going to make a series of it. So that's what I'm doing. It's a part 2, and it's coming hopefully this summer, by this fall.
Very, very good. Because again, like I said, I wanted to know more, not to give away the ending to anybody, but I really wanted to know more. And so I was like, I'm like, now I got to wait. But they do that on television too. You watch a great series and then they kind of stop it at a very important point and say, well, next year, 6 months from now, when the season starts again. And I'm like, I
yeah.
can't. So that was that. It was a phenomenal book. But tell me a little bit about your book. What inspired you to? What was the inspiration behind it?
Well, yes, it was hardships that was going on at home. I remember my 6th grade teacher at the time, Mrs. Thornton. She asked us to write a short story, and I said, I named it "No Longer Daddy's Little Girl" because at the time my father had left. He had left the home. And I said, okay. And I just started writing it. And I did not write it from the state of Georgia. I wrote it like from Mississippi. So as time went on, to give you where I'm going with this, I had kind of pushed the book to the side. And it kind of grew up with me. So every now and then I used to take it out and rewrite it and this and that. Not until 2007, my mother said, I'm going to treat you to a computer. I was like, yay. That's when the Dell computers was coming out. And my husband said, why don't you just go ahead on and write? And I had like a bucket, not like a bucket, but a container of writing that I wrote also during high school. And No Longer Daddy's Little Girl came out. So I started rewriting it again. And then as time went again, I changed it to A Time to Forgive. And then I kept rewriting it and rewriting it. Then I said, my family's not from Mississippi. Both my parents were born and raised in Georgia. So I said, I'm going to make it from Georgia, from the state of Georgia. And on my father's side, they are from the rural parts of Georgia, literally. I mean, I'm talking about country living. So
Yeah.
I made up a town called Creekside County that fit in with my father, his side of the family. They're from Barrow County, Georgia. And then another side is from Jackson County. And then another side is from Macon County. So Macon, Georgia, which is part of all the surroundings of Atlanta. So I just made up Creekside County, Georgia. And that's how A Time to Forgive came about. And then also my great aunt who passed away a couple of years ago, she used to tell us about the jazz history era when she grew up. And she loved that time. She said that was the best time of her life growing up in the 1940s. She had a glimpse of the Harlem Renaissance. She left Georgia with 8 of her friends, but they supposed to went to Seattle, Washington first, but they decided to go to Harlem to see the Harlem Renaissance. And she said they was only there for a night, but she said it was a beautiful time, even though they was there for a night. And then they had to hop on the train from New York and go all the way to Seattle,
Yeah.
Washington. And then from there, they went into San Francisco, and that's where she lived for the rest of her life. And she used to take us to different places in San Francisco where Billie Holiday used to come and perform, Ella Fitzgerald, Count Basie, and she saw all of them. And then she said one night in San Francisco, in the Fillmore district, where the jazz nightclubs were performed, she said that across the street she heard Billie Holiday, and then she heard Ella Fitzgerald. And she said, you know what? They just start dancing in the street because they said they didn't know who to go to that night, you know. So she said that was one of the most fun times of her life.
Now, can I ask you, was that Aunt Queenie?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, because I know you had talked about her in the acknowledgments, and I was going to ask you to give us a little more information about it because she seemed like she was quite an inspiration for you.
She was. She was a very much inspiration for me. She been, you know, she was part of my life all the way up until she passed. And it was very hurtful, you know, when she died, because that was the closest great aunt that I had. I had other great aunts, but she was like the one that was right there in the city where I grew up, you know, born and raised in. And she was the one that introduced me to Ella Fitzgerald. She said, "Have you ever heard of her?" And I was a little girl. And I said, "I remember seeing her on Sesame Street." She said, "Well, yeah." She said, "Well, I'm going to teach you some jazz history." So she turned on Ella Fitzgerald, and I just love Ella. I thought Ella is the greatest, and Billie Holiday and Sarah Vaughan and Duke Ellington. She introduced us to all of them.
Now, do you feel though your relationship with Aunt Queenie that kind of helped inspire your writing a bit? Or who was
Yes,
it that inspired you to?
Actually, it was just not her. It's my family in particular. My family, they're storytellers.
Okay.
During our family dinners when I was a little girl, they used to talk about Georgia a lot. They used to talk about what happened in Georgia. They used to talk about the civil rights movement. Not too long ago, my mom was talking about, she remembered when Emmett Till was lynched. And she remembered how everyone in the neighborhood, they were so succumbed to the lynching of him. And she said that my grandparents were very quiet, and my grandmother just walked away from the TV and started crying. So she said, so my parents used to talk about the segregation and the Jim Crow laws and everything during that time. And my parents, they left Georgia in the 60s and they moved to California because they said they just want a better life. And my mom said during that time, she never went to the zoo. Black children weren't allowed to go to the zoo, or Black people. So she said when she came to San Francisco, she begged my dad to take her to the San Francisco Zoo. because I never understood why. Oh, let's go to the zoo today. It'll be on Sundays. Let's go to the zoo. And I was like, why we always got to go to the zoo? Then I found out that my mother never went to the zoo when she was a little girl. So hopefully, she said when she goes back to Atlanta, she wants to go to the Atlanta Zoo, because she said she never been to the Atlanta Zoo when she was a little girl. So just to hear those stories about how my grandfather, um, he was beaten by the Klan 4 times, and he lived to tell the story. He was chased out of a sundown town when he was a young man, and he lived to tell the story. Um, how my mother said she remembered when she wasn't able to sit at the counter at Woolworths as a little girl, and she really wanted a milkshake, but my grandmother told her, no, we can't go inside of Woolworths. And my mother also remembered, my parents, they do remember when Rosa Parks was arrested when she refused to give up her seat. So those type of storytelling that my family used to tell a lot. They used to tell a lot.
And it's very sad. It must be very heartbreaking to hear those stories. For me, I'm just amazed because my association with Woolworths when I was little was, thank God I could go into Woolworths during Christmas time and buy my 3 brothers shirts for like $4 a piece.
Right.
I thought, I could get them a flannel shirt. It was only $4, and they had a piled high with like 17 different kinds of shirts. And I thought I was spending big money, as like a 10-year-old. But, I never, knew that about Woolworths. There's a lot of things, I guess, that, I don't know, but the stories that I tell you that they've been telling you, I would imagine, would be cause for some great writing, though. Like,
yeah,
really enrich your stories.
right. Because even with the Sunday dinners, we kept that tradition alive for many, many years, because that's a big tradition in the Black community with Sunday dinners. And we kept that tradition alive for a long time. And I remember those Sunday dinners, just having, just eating with the family and hearing, and it was also fun stories about growing up. My parents used to say, growing up in Georgia, they had some good times, versus the Jim Crow laws and the segregation and stuff like that. But they still have some good moments in there. When I can tell you this, my grandmother used to have a baby almost every year, and my mother did not like. She said during that time, the ambulance used to come and pick up the women from the home to the hospital, and then they'll drop the woman off again, and then the ambulance driver used to tell my mom, see you next year, and she was like, ugh. She said that man used to say that to her all the time. So, stuff like that. And I asked my mom recently, because my parents, they were divorced for 26 years. And I said, Mom, where did you meet Daddy? She said it was a bookstore. And my grandmother did not like for my mother to read, I guess, Nancy Drew books.
Yeah.
And so she used to sneak to the bookstore. She used to read them, And she said, that's when I met your dad. Your father was passing by, and he was like, who is that? So, things like that. That was fun to hear about those stories.
Well, then I guess we should all start going. I should start going to the bookstore and see what happens. Is there any section of the book that maybe you could read for us? Read a little sample of your book.
Sure. The sample I like to read.
Or anything in there, actually.
I never read this part. I think I'm going to read chapter 4. This is 1936. Springtime in full effect. The flowers were arranged at their greatest level. I didn't admire my body parts as I had more important things on the agenda. My brother Jimmy taught me how to drive. And Mama made all new clothes for me. I meant Cindy, Teddy Jones are married, and Flossie Mae had given birth to a baby girl named Tasty. And she was fine, She was a fine baby with almond eyes. Nanny had a difference of opinion when she saw the baby. She claimed Tacy was way too dark to be part of our family. It's 1936, the year of our Lord and Savior. I'm 16 years of age. The school year, the city council elected to remove the Negro children from the free Negro schools to a newer school with a disenfranchised Negro children to still attend the one room school east of the creek, which I meant I couldn't see Missy anymore. Missy said it was because Nanny sat on the city council, and once Nanny was elected, she became more than the witch of the South. She's a beast. I mean, the vile beast that God ever created. I didn't realize until the passing of Aunt Rain, Nanny's sister. Aunt Rain had left Missy family some money, but Nanny said it was an overstatement. Her sister didn't know what she was doing on her deathbed. Now they have to search for work on the north side of the creek. I don't know if you want me to read anymore, but when I talk about Nanny in the book, someone asked me, they said, "Oh, I just did not like Nanny." In my family, in most African American families, the colorism was a big thing. Nanny was a colorist, and I didn't put how hard her life was yet, because that's another book that's coming about that.
Okay.
Nanny grew up on her father's plantation. Her mother was an African, well, her grandmother was an African priestess. They were into the Yoruba culture, the Yoruba spirituality that came from Africa. Some people call it voodoo, but some people call it hoodoo. And doing slavery during that time, I'm just going to give you some insight. Nanny became very, very, how can I say this? She became very evil and mean because of what she saw during slavery that was happening with her mother and what was happening to the other slaves. So she became very angry, but she took on this other supremacy about herself because she knew that she had power and control because her father gave her that power and control over his assets, which that was not really heard of back then. But that's how she became so evil and mean and cruel. And she would take from you, and then she would take this person money, and she would pocket into the family's wealth so the family can have more money. So she was a very vile person. But the colorist part of her, she didn't like dark-skinned Black people. She thought they were dirty. If you were about my complexion, she would be okay with you, but you had to be part of this high Black society, which they still have in a lot of in our culture, that you have to have means, or you got to come from old money, and you have to look a certain way for you to participate. So that was about Nanny, just to give you some insight about her.
Yes, it kind of made me think of a little bit when, as you're talking about like myself, in the sense of like when you're in school and you're a little bit different, everyone would like kind of pick on you or tease you, but then when they focused on someone else, you would join in with them because kind of like, well, it's not me, it's someone else. So for a second there, you felt like you were a little better than them, so you would kind of join in a sense and not even think that what it was doing to the other person, because you were just thinking, well, this is my time now to kind of get back because it's not happening to me.
Right. So she was very much like that. I remember when my mother's older sister, my Aunt Virginia, her teacher was a fair-skinned Black man, and he divided the class. He put the darks in the back, the dark skin in the back. My color came on the second row. My complexion, excuse me, came on the second row. And then if you were fair skinned, you was on the first row. And and he hit her. He hit her, and the reason why I'm laughing because the next part is funny. So she went home. She told my grandmother. She told my great grandmother. And my great grandmother was this tall, vibrant Black woman that did not care. She used to wear a gun belt, my mom said. She had a gun belt, and then she had two guns at her ankle. So she went to that school. I don't know if you're familiar with Tyler Perry with Medea, but every
Yes.
time my mother, yeah, when my mother see Medea, she said that's Grandma Missouri. But she said, but Grandma Missouri was a little bit more evil.
Yeah.
So Grandma Missouri went to the school and pistol whooped that teacher. And she rearranged the whole entire classroom. So, you know, when I hear stories about that, I laugh. You know, I laugh about that because she was a gambler. I put some of her traits in the book.
Yeah.
The second book about Aunt Sally Mae. That was that Summer really, really liked her Aunt Sally Mae, really liked her. So I put some of Grandma Missouri in the book. So yeah.
Yeah, I love Medea, especially when she says, "Get ready to taste the rainbow," and
Yeah.
chasing after, you know. So yeah, it's a good analogy kind of to make with her, and she,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
is.
sounds like she was an incredible woman who, didn't let anyone do anything. That was
No,
wrong to her
she
family.
my one of my great uncles was beaten by the police, and she said, point him out to me. And she went over there and she beat him up. And even though she went to jail for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, she went to jail for it. They didn't keep you long in jail back then. So she only stayed maybe, I think my mom said it was like 3 weeks. And she was back home, but that was Grandma Missouri.
So one of the questions I was going to ask you, but maybe you've just answered it, but out of all the stories you were told about the South, which one stood out to you the most?
I think the one that stood out to me the most was my grandfather. When he was captured by the Klan the fourth time, he was on a tree, and they tied the noose around his neck, and they left him for dead. I don't know how he was able to get himself out of it because those ropes are really tight.
Yes.
He got himself out and he survived. So to hear that, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
I would not be here talking to you.
And that is a incredible story, a very sad story, but just the strength, that it shows that your family had, and, to survive that and to move forward. And we're very thankful, that you're here. The book was wonderful. So, we need more books, definitely, to say the least. But, it definitely gives you, like I said, a lot to write about. It's unfortunate that these things happened. I'm very sorry about that, but definitely, these are great things that are, to not great things per se, but it gives you a lot to write about.
Yes.
If you know what I mean.
I wanted to bring more in part 2. I'm going to talk about hoodoo. And a friend of mine, she left Christianity and she's got involved into hoodoo. And I was like, what? So she said she's happy that I'm gonna talk about it, but then I'm gonna push back from it, and then I'm gonna bring it to a close and bring it to the light of how some of us introduced to it. Not the fact that she's really going to get involved too much into it, but I'm just going to introduce. She's going to be introduced to it, but later on, she's going to make the decision, will that fit for her life? And a lot of times, a lot of Christians, they do believe in hoodoo, and a lot of them do practice it in secret. And some of my family members They believe in hoodoo. And I was kind of, my great grandmother, she believed in hoodoo, somewhat of it. I think all my grandmothers, all of them did. So I'm going to kind of bring that to light. And then I'm going to kind of really talk about her mother a little bit, because I don't want to talk about it too much, but I'm going to bring the mother into it, some of it. So in part
Like,
two.
so that would kind of like be a little bit of the backstory on some of the characters that you
Oh,
are.
some of the characters, yeah, yeah, yeah. The summer was totally different. Totally different. Sometimes, children back then and during the 1930s, during the Depression, they wasn't allowed to really talk back. But Summer had this thing like, I'm gonna speak my mind. I just cannot just, when at the table, when she was at the table and she's looking at her family like, these people are really crazy. Literally something is really wrong with my family. And so um that was just different about Summer. She was going to speak her mind, and whether you like it or not. And I think the reason why she spoke her mind is because her mother really didn't have a say so.
Yeah.
Women back then still didn't have a say so in a lot of things.
They didn't have a voice.
They didn't have a voice. They didn't have a voice.
Now, in your book, you start out on the first page with, I'm a 15-year-old woman. Do you feel at 15 you were one of those grown women?
Yes, I did. 15, and I'm almost a woman, and I am a woman. Yeah, yeah. And that's the way, and Summer felt like that because, one, if you look at the book, she was sexually molested by her father.
Yeah.
And sometimes when girls are sexually molested, and boys, they feel like they are somewhat, grown. And she felt like she was really grown, and she had to survive some kind of way.
Yeah, she had a really hard life in the book, but yet she also had this great way of making friends with like everybody and speaking her mind. And with her siblings, she seemed pretty close, with the exception of like the one, I'm sorry, Cindy, I think her name was.
Oh, she
And
could not stand Cindy.
yeah,
Cindy, oh, but she loved Flossie Mae. Flossie
yes.
Mae was oh man, that was her BFF. Even though she said she did tease her a bit, because she said she didn't understand what was going on with her mind. Back then, they didn't know what to call it back then. Like my aunt said, one of our cousins, not to be, harsh, but they were slow, and they said something just up here just wasn't right. We don't know what's wrong with them. I think they're just kind of stupid. But Summer, being who she was, she knew that wasn't the terminology to call her sister. She just knew that she was just different.
Now, do you have any siblings? And if you do, are you close with them?
Yes, I am close. I'm close to my sister. Yes, I'm close to my sister, very much so.
So does that kind of filter into your writing too, though? Like the kind of the relationship the two of you had?
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does. I mean, we're very much fire. They call us fire signs. She's an Aries and I'm a Leo.
Oh, okay.
So, and also Summer is an Aries. I had to give her that fire sign power.
Yeah, she definitely she's definitely a strong character in the book. There are a lot of great characters in the book, but I do love her character. The way like she's willing to admit that she still has a lot to learn and she's trying to learn, but she's very willing to like kind of test the limits and stand up for people that she feels are being wronged. And and I know that it's much to her grandmother's probably chagrin on all that, but she definitely, is, I would say, a powerful person in the book. And I'm assuming in the second book, she'll really take a stand on that.
Yeah. It's the second one is really going to shock a lot of people. She's going to go through some challenges that's going to really hit her like, wow, why did this have to happen to me? You
Yeah.
know, what did I, what did I do wrong for me to go through this and go through that? So she's going to be asking a lot of questions about that.
Now, she was in love with Duck, or so
Yes.
she thought in the beginning, and they had this, wild romance, and, he was spoken for probably by more than one woman, unfortunately. And,
Yeah.
you really go into depth about the love that she felt and how it, changed her, it hurt, and the hope that she had that things were going to go her way. Describe the first time you fell in love.
Oh my goodness, I had so many of them. But okay, so let's go back to the year of 1986. I think it was more like a little puppy love crush that I had on a boy. And it was it was something else. He was embarrassed because it was all around our neighborhood. It was all around the neighborhood. I was 11 and I think he was like 15. Oh, some little girl like him. I mean, it was just so embarrassing. And but the embarrassing part was he asked my friend for her phone number in front of me.
Oh.
I was like, okay. And I was upset. I was mad. I was angry with her. So it happened. And then years later I ran into him and I didn't know who he was at first. And I was like, oh, hi. And he said, wow. He said, you grew up to be a beautiful woman. I said, well, thank you. And then we ended up seeing each other at my little cousin's funeral. And that was about it. So, that was the first time, but I've been in love, oh my goodness, so many times before I met my husband.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I got stories to tell about that. I got a story I remember I told a friend of mine. I remember when I got dropped off at the cemetery one night. I laughed about it now. I mean, I laughed about it then. I was with my friend and we both got kicked out the car by these two guys, and it was just, but we made it home. We made it home, but it was hilarious. Yeah. I mean, because we had to walk down on these graves, and it was foggy because, not to change the story, but outside of San Francisco in Daly City, there's a city called Coma, California, and go look it up. It's a city of cemeteries. So we had to walk down the hill, and I'm heated. I'm really heated. And she's trying to tiptoe over the graves and stuff, and I'm heated. And I said, now how are we going to get home? So luckily, a bus was out of service, and I was waiting for the bus to get us back all the way back to Oakland. And the bus driver, he stopped and he took us to the BART station, and we made it home safely. But I mean, oh my goodness, just to look back on it now, it is funny, and I do have stories to tell about that. So yes, I've been in love plenty of times.
And so like you tell us how you met your husband.
Well, let's see. I met him in 1987. He was dancing at the Pier 39. And I said, he is fine, but I will never ever date or marry a man from East Palo Alto. They had a bad reputation, very bad reputation. And I said, nah. Ooh. So years later, I took an English class with his cousin. And she said, hey, I'm gonna call you over the holidays. And I said, oh, okay. So she called me over the holidays. Mind you, I had my things already packed. I was going to move to Los Angeles. And I had my things already packed. I was moving to LA. And she said, listen, I'm going to hook you up with my cousin. I said, oh, Lord, here we go again. I don't want to get hooked up again. So she said, I'm going to hook you up. And when I seen him, we was like, and mind my husband, he's way older than me. But I was like, oh, Lord. But we're together. We be together 20 years in September 13th will be our 20th wedding anniversary.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Now you have an older daughter. Do you ever think she'll become a writer?
My daughter, she's more of a, I don't think she'll become a writer. Maybe, but she's more like a poet. She like poetry. And she's somewhat like a hippie.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, she's like a hippie, a poet type of gal. So she probably write poetry. I can see her doing poetry because she likes poetry.
If you could have been born in any generation, which one would it be and why?
I think I would like to be part of the Harlem Renaissance. I guess it's because of I studied the Harlem Renaissance before, and it was a time of awareness. It was culture. It was, freedom, paving the way for the next generation. Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, the music was phenomenal then, and the dancing, and I can kind of see you out there singing and dancing and just
just having a good time.
Yeah,
and also in part two, I put a story similar to my great aunt when Summer is standing in the middle of the street and she's about to go into one of the biggest ballrooms in Harlem, and she sees the sign in a red neon lights that says Chuck Webb featuring Ella Fitzgerald. And I put that moment in there because I remember when my aunt said when she saw and when she heard that Billie Holiday and Ella was singing, she stood there in the middle. Like, wow, I'm really in history. And that's the way how Summer felt when she got to Harlem. She really felt like she was part of history at that time.
On page, and I just want to go quickly, I'm down to page 103, where Summer says, when will women be able to become a citizen in our country instead of being treated as property? Although women can now vote, of course, run for Senate, own a home, do you think we're still being treated as property?
I think that times have changed. Women have stepped up their game, across the board. We have, women that are governors now. That was very unheard of, a woman being a governor. Yeah. It's also heard of a woman, not being vice president. Women that's running corporations. Women now are becoming, ministers.
Yes.
That's there, and that's still a fight within the religious community. You hear women now, they are in Congress. I remember my parents, they worked on the campaign of Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm was the first Black woman to ever become Congress, And I remember my parents, and she ran for president. She ran for president in the early 1970s. And my parents, they worked on her campaign in the city of San Francisco. So when my mom said to see that was like That was a big thing then. That was a big thing back then. So when Summer said that, Summer had prophetic vision, and she already knew that women were going to become somebody, and that gave her hope because she wanted to change the world her own way. But in the last series of A Time to Forgive, where I'm going to do the novel of that, her granddaughter is going to keep that dream alive.
That sounds like it's going to be very exciting. Again, I am looking forward to another book. I'm patiently waiting, or maybe not patiently, but I am waiting. So that will be a great thing, definitely, to keep reading as it comes on. In your book, you use the phrase, "Don't you know it's a man's world?" Is it, or has the playing field between us become a little more equal?
Wow. I didn't even know I'll even put that quote there. That's a powerful quote.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a powerful quote. That came from her father, correct?
No, actually, that came from Summer when her father come into the room and he was.
Oh yeah.
She.
Her father was. Oh, her
Son.
father was a. And he has a story, but she deep down inside, Summer hated that man. She hated the way how he treated her. He hated the way how he treated her sister and her mother. She just hated this man. So when that time came to give it to him, oh, she was going to give it to him. She said, I'm going to tell you how it is. Women are going to run this country. Women are going to be, they're going to own homes. Women are going to be, you know, public figures, whatever it was. And she meant that. And that made him upset because women then didn't have a voice. And the reason why I put her mother without a voice, because my grandmother didn't have a voice. My grandmother was a abused woman, and she didn't have a voice. And I remember when my mother, when she said, when my grandfather had company, he said, Emma, go in the next room. And my grandmother would go into the next room. Men used to treat women like that. And Summer didn't like it.
Yeah.
Summer did not like it. And she was going to let him have it. So when she did on page, I'm going to go to page 103 real quickly. When she went, oh, yes. She said, the moment he pulled up from my bed, I balled my fist waiting to sock him. You think you're so brilliant reading all those damn books about women's rights. Do you know it's a man's world? I push daddy from me and I jump off the bed square and toe to toe, and I won't stop beating up my gums about women's liberation, and that's final. Daddy lit another cigar this time and he ground his teeth like, Nanny, I suggest you keep your mouth closed before you regret it, he warned. This time Daddy watched me giving him the middle finger. Because she was upset. She was upset with him. And I think this is the time that she put on 102. She watched him, beat her mother.
Yeah.
But you're going to see something, I'm going to talk more about that in part 2.
I felt like he was intimidated in the sense because in his reality, he was used to getting what he wanted, walking over women, abusing women, taking anyone he wanted to, and then just coming out and preaching, like at all the churches and in front of women as if, he was kind of holy and, that he put himself kind of up on a pedestal. And for her to say that now it's going to become a woman's world and there's all these things that we're going to do and I'm not going to keep quiet, that kind of threatens him because, well, gosh, then, he doesn't have much to stand on if the women start to take away from what he wants.
No. Yes. And she meant that. And I got that part from my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother was a very outspoken woman. She my grandfather wasn't the best man, but she spoke her mind. And when she spoke her mind, that was that. That was that. So I put some of my great grandmother into Summer.
Well, it definitely shows, that some of your family was in the book, and again, a phenomenal read. Back in the day, we talk about how, or you talked in the book about how there was such kind of the stigma against pregnant unwed women, and how they had to be sent somewhere else, and this big story had to be created for those that wanted to know in town, like what happened, where'd they go, and oh, they're going on vacation, they're staying with an aunt, they're visiting a friend, they're coming back, they went to school, whatever. And do you feel that's still true today?
Absolutely. Especially within the church. It's still not a very much acceptance. I remember a friend of mine, she got pregnant out of wedlock, and she's grown. At this time, she was like 21, and her church had a yellow rope that was um that was it was in the pews, and those yellow ropes, she had to sit there with her children because she had her children out of wedlock. And she said she got up and she left, and she went to another church that was more accepting. So it's still a stigma within the church that if you have children outside of wedlock, you're not acceptable.
Yes.
Some people pick up, I don't know if it was in the book. I believe I put it in the book when when no, it's in, okay, so I'm jumping over my head. I'm jumping over my head. I took out, just to talk about the stigma of pregnancy. The first time I wrote A Time to Forgive, I had Summer to get an abortion. And I'm going to redo part 1 again because I want to put that in there. Summer had an abortion the first time I wrote it, and her grandmother beat her, and her grandmother used a Bible scripture as she was beating her, saying that bastards are not welcome in the house of God. And she's beating her, constantly beating her. So so that was another stigma back then, abortion rights. Summer felt like, when I wrote it the first time, she felt like, it was her choice to keep the baby or not. Something that is now that's pro-choice or pro-life. She wanted to keep her child. So my daughter was like, "Mama, don't." She said, "Oh my goodness," because she said when I wrote the first time, she started crying. She was like, "Oh, Mama, that was just so sad." But I'm thinking about bringing that part into when I edit part 1 again. I want to bring that part out because I wanted to show people that how abortion affected women back then as well.
Yes.
And and it was illegal. It was illegal. My mom said she remember her and my dad, they grew up in the same neighborhood, and they remember the doctor that used to perform abortion on young girls, and sometimes young girls used to die back then. So I want to bring that up, and just to have, for people to have a conversation.
Yes, I think showing kind of both sides of the coin is powerful
Yes.
for your book. But again, the way that you want to change it, I think that would definitely be powerful too. In a great way.
Yes. So people can get both perspectives of it, because it is still a stigma in within our society.
Well, now that you are a published author, what does the future hold for Libby?
To write more books, that's one. To get into more public speaking, to do that. And to change the world as much as possible.
I think those are powerful things, and that sets a great example for your older daughter too, you know.
Yes, yes.
And I would just like to say 3 people have joined. I am so sorry. I was not trying to, ignore anyone here. But, if you have any questions or anything you want to ask her about her book or about her, please feel free to speak and, ask questions away. It's not just about my talking away. If anyone has anything they'd like to comment or say, that's perfectly fine. But thank you for joining us too. Well, I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for attending. If no one has anything else to say, I'm appreciative that you came and you were listening to her story in her book. And if you haven't had a chance to buy it, I would definitely recommend buying it and reading it because it is a phenomenal read. And once you get to the end, you just gotta wait till book 2 comes. But thank you very much for that. And our next She Reads podcast is going to be on Wednesday at 7 p.m. And we are featuring poet Renee Drummond Brown and her book of poetry called I Found My Voice. And if you know of someone who is a survivor of sexual abuse and you are a woman or a child, a girl that is a survivor of sexual abuse, and you want to be part of a sisterhood or part of a group that is welcoming and a safe space for sharing and is private, please check us out at www.healingwatersglobal.com. We would love to talk to you, meet with you, and hear your stories if you're willing to share, and know that you'll be surrounded by other women who have gone through similar things, and we are here to help anyway. Libby, if you would like to, is there anything else you want to add, or if you want to close this out in prayer?
No, I just want to say, thank you for having me, Lord. This was great. This is my second interview in the past couple of months. So I'm looking forward to doing more interviews with you, especially and also part 3 comes out too.
Yes.
So there's a part 3. That's the final of somewhat of, summer talking. And then we're going to have the other one that talks, the first shall be last. And this one you actually get to hear Dutch talk. He's gonna talk about why he was, but you also gonna why he was the way he was at one point of his life. But you're gonna hear the beginning of it in part 2. No, part 3. Sorry, of A Time to Forgive.
Well, we look forward to all of those books coming, and we will wait patiently. And if you have any words of wisdom you want to throw out to other people who may, later on watch this and want to become writers?
Sure. Becoming a writer is great, I think, because you're able to write the way how you want to write, and it's a world that you can make up. It's a make up. I call it a make believe world, and you can add any type of twist you want, any type of plot. You can create your own type of universe, your own kind of town. You can do whatever you want to do. It's a free thinking, a free choice kind of life.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, everyone who hopped on to join us too. I hope you all have a beautiful weekend and a wonderful week ahead. Happy Earth Day, because today is Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day, yes.
And thank you so much for not only sharing your book, but sharing your life with us and your family's stories, because they're very important to keep those alive and to keep retelling them and kind of writing them down and including them in your stories. That's a thing I feel, is very important that a lot of people miss out on, where they say, well, I wish I had written them down or had told them, and they don't remember them as well as when they get older. So I think this is, really important, and we should all, do that to keep our family's history alive and to keep the stories going. So thank you for being so willing to share that with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you
very
so
much
much.
so.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And please check us again this coming Wednesday at 7 p.m.